The cleaner whispered urgently, "Your daughter-in-law put something in your medicine bottle when you weren't looking." I stayed calm and quietly switched the bottles. The next morning, my son called screaming, "Mom, my wife collapsed. What did you do?" I smiled and said, "Nothing, dear. She took her own medicine." Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The spoon clinked against the china cup as I stirred honey into my tea. Morning light fell across the kitchen table in a warm, familiar rectangle. I was measuring my week by the slow descent of the sun across the linoleum. That particular Tuesday had no right to be so peaceful. Maria's footsteps were usually a soft shuffle, a background rhythm to my morning. That day, they were sharp, rapid taps that stopped just behind my chair. I turned, a greeting on my lips, but it died there. Her face was the color of old ash. Her hands, usually steady with a dust cloth or a spray bottle, were knotted together in front of her apron. "Senora Ellie," she said. Her voice was low, a strained thread of sound. "We need to talk now in private." It was not a request. It was a warning. I placed my spoon down carefully on the saucer. The click was terribly loud. "Is something wrong with the house?" "No." Her eyes flicked toward the hallway, toward the bedrooms. "It is about the house, about who is in it." I rose, my body moving with a calm I did not feel. A cold knot was forming in my stomach, separate from the warmth of the tea. I led us to the small laundry room, the hum of the dryer a private white noise. I closed the door. The space was tight, smelling of clean linen and detergent. "What is it, Maria?" She took a shaky breath. "Last Thursday, you were at your book club. I was polishing the master bathroom fixtures." Her words came out in a rushed whisper. "I heard a car. I thought you forgot something. I went to the top of the stairs to see. It was not you." "Who was it?" "Chloe." She said the name like it was a curse. "She let herself in with her key. She did not call out. She went straight down the hall to your room, to your bathroom." I leaned against the washing machine. The metal was cool through my cardigan. Perhaps she needed to use it. "She was in there for 7 minutes." Maria's eyes were wide, imploring me to understand. "I counted. I stayed at the top of the stairs, hidden. She came out, she looked satisfied. She smoothed her blouse. She left without touching anything else. She never saw me." The cold knot tightened. What was she doing in my bathroom for 7 minutes? Maria's gaze dropped to the floor, then rose to meet mine, full of a terrified certainty. "Your medicine, Senora Ellie, the little bottle by the sink, your heart pills. I did not think anything of it until later. But then I remembered the last time she visited, the Sunday before, she brought you tea. She insisted on taking the cup to the kitchen. She passed that bathroom. She could have seen the bottle, noticed the label." A void opened up beneath me. The hum of the dryer receded. The world narrowed to Maria's frightened face and the image of my daughter-in-law in my private space. Chloe, David's wife, the woman who kissed my cheek and called me Mom with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "You believe she tampered with my medication?" I stated it flatly. It was not a question. "I have worked for you for 11 years, Maria said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. "You are a good woman. Your son is a good man, but that woman, she has a hungry look. I have seen it when she talks about this house, when she asks David about retirement accounts. I did not want to believe it, but I had to tell you." I looked at my hands. They were steady. I was surprised by that. Inside, a structure was collapsing. The architecture of my family, which I had believed was built on mutual respect, was cracking along a fault line I had refused to see. Trust, once fractured, does not make a sound. It just ceases to bear weight. "You did the right thing," I said finally. My voice sounded distant, even to me. "Thank you, Maria. This stays between us. Do not speak of it to anyone." "What will you do?" "I will be careful." I opened the laundry room door. The ordinary light of the hallway seemed artificial. "Go back to your work. Act normally, please." She nodded, wiping her palms on her apron. She slipped out, leaving me in the humming silence. I walked back to the kitchen. My tea was still on the table, now lukewarm. I did not sit. I walked through the living room, past the photographs of David growing up, of my late husband, Martin, smiling his steady smile. I climbed the stairs. My bedroom was as I left it. Bed made, novel on the nightstand, a shaft of sun on the rug. I went into the bathroom. It was just a bathroom. Peach towels, a tube of hand cream, a water glass. And on the porcelain counter next to the faucet, a small orange plastic bottle with a white cap. I picked it up. It felt light. The prescription label had my name on it, Alina Reynolds. Take 1 tablet daily for hypertension. It was from the refill I picked up 2 weeks ago. I opened it. The pills inside were small, white, scored down the middle. They looked exactly as they should. I shook one into my palm. It looked normal. It smelled like nothing but chalky medicine. This was the moment of decision. I could call David. I could confront Chloe. I could create a scene, a drama, a fracture in the family that might never heal. I could be the hysterical mother-in-law accusing a beloved wife with only the word of a housekeeper as proof. That is what she would expect. That is what the character she had assigned to me, the elderly, trusting, slightly fatting grandmother, would do. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. A black woman in her early 60s, silver hair in its neat twists, eyes that had seen a husband buried and a son raised. Eyes that had guided countless teenagers to the right book in a library for 40 years. I was not hysterical. I was a librarian. I understood research. I understood evidence. I understood that the most powerful stories are the ones where the quietest character holds the key to the plot. I did not see a victim in that mirror. I saw a strategist. I poured the pill back into the bottle and screwed the cap on tightly. I placed it back in its exact spot. I did not take my dose that morning. A skipped day would not hurt me. I had been feeling fine. I returned downstairs. Maria was vacuuming the living room rug. She glanced at me. I gave her a small, tight nod. It was all the communication we needed. The warning had been heard. The game, though I did not yet know all its rules, was acknowledged. I finished my cold tea. The sweetness had turned cloying. I washed the cup and saucer, my hands moving through the routine by memory. My mind was elsewhere. It was in a pharmacy, considering empty bottles. It was planning a switch, a simple, physical swap that would turn a weapon back on its wielder. It was thinking about the fact that to catch a poisoner, one must first understand the poison. And the best way to do that is to let them believe their plan is proceeding perfectly. The sun had moved. The rectangle of light was gone from the table. The warm, safe haven of my kitchen felt different now. The walls were the same, the appliances the same, but the air had changed. It was charged with a silent, waiting tension. My home had been violated. My trust had been betrayed. But as I stood there, drying my hands on a dish towel, I felt the first stirrings of a cold, clear purpose. This was not the end of my peace. It was the beginning of my response. And my response would be measured, precise, and utterly quiet. The cold clarity of purpose did not leave me that day. It sat in my chest, a steady, frozen weight. I moved through the afternoon routines, watering the geraniums on the porch, sorting the mail, with my mind working on a separate, parallel track. The first step was intelligence. I needed to understand what I was dealing with, and I needed the tools to counter it. I told Maria I was going to the grocery store. I drove instead to a pharmacy across town, one I never used. The fluorescents were harsh, the aisles crowded with brightly colored boxes. I felt invisible, just another older woman shopping. I found the section with empty pill bottles. I bought 3 of the small, orange, child-resistant containers. They were generic, identical in size and shape to the one in my bathroom. I paid in cash. When I returned, Maria was finishing the windows. She saw the pharmacy bag in my hand and her shoulders tensed. I nodded toward the laundry room. Once inside with the door shut, I showed her the bottles. "I need to switch the contents," I said, my voice low. "Tonight, after dark, I will need you to be my lookout. If Chloe or David call or come over, you must delay them. Create a reason for me not to answer the door or the phone immediately." Maria's face was solemn. She did not question the plan. She simply asked, "How can I help with the switch?" "Stand in the hallway. Listen. If you hear anything, a car, the phone, someone at the door, you will cough. Twice. Loudly. That will be my signal to stop, to hide what I am doing. And if they come upstairs?" "They won't. David never drops by unannounced since he married Chloe. And Chloe, she has already done her work. She will be waiting for the results, not checking on the scene of the crime." I heard the bitterness in my own words and suppressed it. Emotion was a liability now. We agreed she would stay late, saying she was behind on polishing the silver. It was a plausible excuse. The hours until evening passed with agonizing slowness. I forced myself to eat a small dinner. I read a chapter of my book but retained none of it. Every sound was amplified, the tick of the clock, the house settling, the distant sound of a passing car. Finally, the sunset faded to dusk. Maria turned on the porch light, a signal to any casual observer that someone was home and awake. Upstairs, I did not turn on the overhead light in my bedroom. I used the small lamp on my nightstand, casting a low pool of illumination. Maria took her post in the hallway, near the top of the stairs. I entered my bathroom and closed the door. I did not lock it. A locked door would be suspicious if interrupted. I laid out my supplies on the closed lid of the toilet. The 3 new bottles, a sheet of white paper, a small funnel I used for refilling decorative oils, and a pair of latex gloves from under the kitchen sink. My hands were steady as I pulled on the gloves. The snap of latex against my wrists was a decisive sound. I picked up the original bottle from the counter. For a moment, I just held it. This was the object. This simple, mundane thing was supposed to be the instrument of my end. A slow, medical undoing disguised as a natural decline. The anger rose then, a hot, sharp wave, but I channeled it into my fingers. I unscrewed the cap. I poured the pills onto the sheet of paper. They made a soft, rattling cascade. I counted them silently. 23. I should have had 30. 7 were missing. Either she had taken a few to analyze or she had already replaced some. My breath caught. This was no longer just suspicion, it was physical evidence of subtraction. I picked up one of the new bottles. Using the funnel, I carefully poured all 23 pills from the paper into it. I screwed the cap shut. This was now my real medicine, safely housed in a container no one would look for. I labeled it in my mind, Bottle A safe. Next, I took the second new bottle. From the original, now empty container, I peeled off the prescription label with great care. It was designed not to be removed intact, but with patience and the edge of my fingernail, I managed it. I smoothed it onto the second new bottle. This bottle was empty. This would be the decoy, the bait. I placed it on the counter exactly where the original had been. Bottle B bait. Now came the delicate part. I needed to fill the original bottle with something convincing. I could not leave it empty. She might check. The pills had to look correct. I thought of the vitamins in the guest bathroom, the expensive, gummy ones Chloe took and always left out on the counter. They were a different shape, but they were small. They were pills. In the dim light from a distance, they might pass a cursory inspection. I slipped out of my bathroom. Maria stiffened in the hallway. I put a finger to my lips and moved past her to the guest room. The door was open. The ensuite bathroom was dark. I did not turn on the light. I felt my way to the counter. My gloved hand found the small, square bottle of multivitamins. I shook out a handful and returned to my room. Back at my makeshift workstation, I compared them. My heart medication was small, round, white. The vitamins were slightly larger, oval, and a pale orange. It would not hold up to close scrutiny, but Chloe would not be doing a close scrutiny. She would be watching from afar, waiting for me to weaken. She would perhaps glance at the bottle to see if it was being used. She would see pills inside. That was all that mattered for now. I filled the original bottle, now bottle C, the trap, with 23 of the orange vitamins. I screwed the cap back on. This was the bottle that had sat on my counter. This was the bottle she had tampered with. I needed to put it back, but not here. It needed to be somewhere she could access again, to potentially double-check her work or add more of whatever she had introduced. I had an idea. I opened my mirrored medicine cabinet. It was crowded with dental floss, antacids, spare toothpaste. On the top shelf pushed to the back was a half-empty box of bandages. I placed bottle C, the original bottle now full of vitamins, behind that box. It was in plain sight if you opened the cabinet and looked closely, but it was not in its usual spot. If Chloe came looking, she would find it. She would assume I had moved it, perhaps out of a growing, paranoid concern. She would feel clever. She would feel in control. I returned bottle B, the labeled but empty decoy, to the exact spot on the counter. Then I hid bottle A, containing my real medicine, in the bottom of my knitting basket in the living room, buried under skeins of gray wool. I cleaned up. I folded the paper, put the funnel away, removed the gloves. I flushed the remaining vitamins down the toilet. I washed my hands. I looked at the bathroom. Everything appeared normal. The only thing on the counter was an empty bottle waiting to be filled with poison. I opened the bathroom door. Maria was still at her post. She looked at me, her eyes asking the question. "It is done," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "The real medicine is safe. The fake is in its place, and the original bottle is hidden in the cabinet with substitutes inside." Maria let out a long, slow breath. "What now?" "Now," I said, walking to the nightstand and turning off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness save for the streetlight glow through the blinds. "We wait, and we watch, and I take one vitamin gummy every morning from a bottle in my knitting basket." A strange, hollow feeling settled in me. The active part was over for now. I had secured my defense, but in doing so, I had fully acknowledged the war. My home was no longer just my home. It was a battlefield with marked territories and disguised traps. I had laid the first one. I could only wait to see who would spring it. The waiting was an active occupation. Each morning, I would take my single vitamin gummy from the hidden bottle in my knitting basket. The orange pill felt like a declaration of war in my mouth, sweet and artificial. I made a show of going upstairs at the same time each day, entering my bathroom and running the faucet. I would rattle the empty decoy bottle on the counter for a moment before setting it down. I performed the ritual for an audience I could not see but felt was always watching. Chloe called the next day. Her voice was a syrup of concern. "Just checking in, Mom. You sounded a little tired when we spoke last week. Everything okay?" "I'm perfectly fine, dear," I said, my tone light. "Just enjoying the quiet." "Are you sleeping well? Remembering to take all your medications?" The question was inserted like a thin blade. "Oh yes, right on schedule. Why do you ask?" A slight pause. "No reason, just at your age it's easy to forget. David and I worry." "That's very kind, but don't trouble yourself." I changed the subject to her work and she let it go, but the probe had been made. She visited 2 days after the switch. I heard her car pull up, the precise click of her heels on the walkway. I was in the garden, pruning the rose bushes. It was a good prop. It gave me a reason to be outside, to observe her approach without seeming to. "Ellie, there you are." She leaned in for a cheek kiss. I turned my face, offering the air beside it. She pretended not to notice. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd pop in. Bring you some of that herbal tea you liked." She held out a small bag. I took it with soil-streaked gloves. "Thank you, that's thoughtful." "Can I get you some water? You look flushed from the sun." Her eyes were scanning me, looking for signs of unsteadiness, pallor, confusion. "I'm quite all right, but you can bring 2 glasses to the patio table if you'd like to sit." She went inside. I watched her through the kitchen window. She moved with purpose, not toward the glasses immediately, but down the hallway toward the downstairs powder room, a reconnaissance mission. She was back a moment later, empty-handed. She hadn't found what she was looking for there. She fetched the water, her smile a little tighter. We sat. She asked polite, empty questions about the garden, but her gaze kept drifting to the back door, to the staircase inside. She was calculating. Finally, she said, "I actually wanted to ask a tiny favor. I think I left my favorite lipstick here last weekend. A nude shade. Would you mind if I ran up to the guest room to check?" The request was so transparent, it was almost an insult. The guest room was a pretext. The upstairs hallway led past my room, past my open bathroom door. "Not at all," I said, sipping my water. "You know where it is." I watched her go. I did not follow. I sat perfectly still, listening. Her footsteps ascended the stairs, went past the creaky floorboard outside the guest room, and continued down the hall toward the master bedroom. I heard no door open. She would be standing in the hallway, looking into my room. She would see the bathroom door ajar, the counter visible. She would see the decoy bottle right where it should be. The footsteps returned, quicker this time. She reappeared, a tube of lipstick in her hand, likely produced from her own purse upstairs. "Found it," she announced, a note of triumph in her voice. It wasn't about the lipstick. It was about confirming the bait was in place. "I'm glad," I said. She stayed for another 20 minutes, her energy visibly relaxed. The hunt was over. The trap was set in her mind. She left with breezy promises to have David call me soon. David came for dinner the following evening. Chloe did not join, citing a work deadline. I knew it was strategic. She wanted him to see me alone to plant seeds. I made his favorite pot roast. The house was filled with its warm, savory smell. He seemed his usual self, a little distracted by his phone, but affectionate. Over apple cobbler, he grew hesitant. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Chloe mentioned she stopped by. She said you seemed a little out of sorts, that you forgot she was coming and that you looked tired." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "She's just worried. We both are." I put my fork down carefully. Did she describe what out of sorts looked like? "Well, no, just not yourself," he fumbled. "Maybe you should see Dr. Evans for a checkup, just to be safe." This was the narrative she was building. The early stages of decline, forgetfulness, fatigue, a gradual weakening that would make the eventual heart failure plausible. She was preparing the ground, using my son as her tiller. "David," I said, keeping my voice even and clear. "Look at me. Am I slurring my words? Am I confused about what day it is or what we're eating? Did I leave the stove on or misplace my keys?" He looked at me then, really looked. I saw him taking in my steady gaze, my clean plate, the ordered kitchen. "No, of course not." "I am 62. I am in excellent health. My last checkup was perfect. I take 1 pill a day for blood pressure I've had for 15 years. I am not tired. I am not forgetful." I leaned forward slightly. "What I am is concerned that my daughter-in-law is interpreting a quiet afternoon in the garden as a medical episode." He flushed. "She didn't mean it like that. She's just concerned." "I understand concern. This feels like something else." I left it hanging, a delicate accusation. I could not push harder, not without the evidence, but I had to start bending the twigs so it would snap in the right direction later. He backtracked, embarrassed. "You're right, I'm sorry, you seem great, let's just drop it." We finished dessert on safer topics, but the seed of doubt had been planted in 2 directions now. My doubt about Chloe was confirmed by her espionage, and a tiny, fragile doubt about Chloe had been placed in David's mind. After he left, I stood at the sink, washing the dishes. The calm I projected was a veneer. Inside, my mind was a cold, humming engine. Her play was clear. Isolate the target. Question their competence. Create a consensus of concern. Then, when the inevitable happens, everyone nods sadly and says, "We saw it coming." She was fatting. She had checked the bait. She had begun the psychological campaign. The next move in her plan would be to wait for the poison to work, and my move was to watch her wait, to document every visit, every call, every concerned comment. I went to the small desk in the living room and took out a fresh, lined notebook. On the first page, I wrote the date. Then I began, in my precise librarian's script, to record the events of the past 3 days. Times, durations, direct quotes. It was not yet evidence of a crime, but it was a record of a pattern. And patterns, I knew, could be as damning as fingerprints. The notebook became my anchor. Each entry was a fact, a time, a quote. It objectified the betrayal, turning emotional poison into data points. I was compiling a case file, though I did not yet know who the jury would be. The routine of observation gave me a purpose that almost, but not quite, masked the deep ache of waiting. Maria came on her usual Friday. The house was quiet. I was in the living room, writing down the details of David's dinner visit, his exact words, my exact responses. I heard her start upstairs, the vacuum cleaner droning in the bedrooms. I tried to focus on my book, but the words swam on the page. My attention was tuned to the sounds above me, the vacuum stopping, the start of the shower spray in the master bathroom as she cleaned it, the subsequent silence of her working in the guest room. The silence lasted too long. I put my book down. I listened. No movement, no sounds of cleaning. After 5 full minutes, I stood and walked quietly to the bottom of the stairs. "Maria," I called, not too loudly. Her head appeared at the top of the landing. Her expression was strange, a mix of apprehension and fierce satisfaction. She held up one finger, *, wait*, and then pointed emphatically toward the back of the house, toward the laundry room. Then she disappeared back into the guest room. I understood. I went to the laundry room and waited, the hum of the dryer now a familiar co-conspirator. She entered a few minutes later, closing the door behind her. In her hand was not a cleaning tool, but a small, crumpled piece of paper. She had smoothed it out, but the creases were deep. "In the guest room," she said, her voice hushed but intense. "In the small wastebasket by the desk. It was under a used tissue. I almost threw it away without looking." She handed me the paper. It was a pharmacy receipt. The store was a CVS on the other side of the city, not the one near their apartment. The date was the Tuesday before her last visit, the day after Maria had seen her in my bathroom. The list of items was short: toothpaste, mouthwash, and one other thing. The line item was clear: lorazepam 1 mg, 30. I stared at the word. Lorazepam, a sedative, a powerful anti-anxiety medication. It was not prescribed to me. It was not, to my knowledge, prescribed to David. I had never known Chloe to take such a drug. The receipt indicated 30 pills, a full month's supply. My mind made the connection with a cold, logical click. The missing pills from my bottle, 7 of them. She had taken some of my heart medication, ground them up perhaps, and mixed them with a ground-up sedative. Then she had returned the adulterated mixture to my bottle. A combination like that could cause profound dizziness, dangerously low blood pressure, respiratory depression. It could look like a sudden, fatal cardiac event in an older woman with a known heart condition. The method was discovered. The receipt was not proof of the act, but it was proof of the tool. It revealed premeditation. She had purchased the weapon. "She has not prescribed this," I said, more to myself than to Maria. "I know," Maria whispered. "I checked the medicine cabinet in the guest bathroom when I cleaned it last time. There is nothing like that. Only vitamins, allergy pills, things like that. This is new. This was bought for a purpose." The motive, which had been a dark cloud, now solidified into a stark, ugly shape. It wasn't just dislike or impatience. It was calculation. She wanted my house. She wanted the life insurance Martin had left me, which was substantial. She wanted my savings, which were tidy. She wanted David's inheritance without the weight. I was an obstacle to be cleared, and she had chosen a method she thought was untraceable, a quiet fade to black that would leave her looking like a grieving daughter-in-law. A cold fury settled in my bones, so absolute it felt like calm. I looked at Maria. "You did not find this." "No, Senora." "The wastebasket is empty now." "Yes, I put the liner in the big trash. The pickup was yesterday. It is gone." I nodded. I folded the receipt carefully along its existing creases. This is the link, the motive and the method. Without this, it is my word against hers. Even with the switched bottles, it could be spun as an old woman's confusion. I placed the receipt in the pocket of my cardigan. I need to understand this drug. I need to know exactly what it does. "What will you do?" Maria asked, the same question, but now weighted with greater urgency. "Nothing yet. The plan does not change. She expects the poison to work. She will be watching for effects. We continue to give her nothing to see." I touched the paper in my pocket. "But this changes everything for me. Now I know it is not suspicion. It is fact. She bought the sedative with the intent to use it on me. That is a line that cannot be uncrossed." The rest of Maria's cleaning shift passed in a blur of normalcy. I heard her vacuuming again, the sounds of spray and wiping. But my mind was in a medical library researching interactions. Lorazepam, heart medication. Synergistic depressive effects on the central nervous system. Possible outcomes: falls, confusion, coma, death. She hadn't chosen a dramatic poison. She had chosen a chemical augmenter, something to make my own medicine turn against me. It was clever. It was murder with plausible deniability. After Maria left, I went to my desk. I did not write about the receipt in the notebook. That information was too volatile to commit to paper yet. Instead, I opened my laptop. I spent 2 hours reading medical journals, patient information leaflets, toxicology reports. I learned the half-life, the common side effects, the dangers of mixing it with other depressants. I became an expert on the tool meant for my murder. Knowledge was armor. With each paragraph I read, my fear diminished, replaced by a colder, harder resolve. She had tried to weaponize my body against me. She had used my trust, my son's love, as the delivery system. The emotional betrayal was vast, but I could not afford to feel its depth. I had to focus on the mechanics. I printed out several pages of information. I folded them and placed them in the same locked box where I kept my passport and Martin's will. Next to them, I placed the crumpled receipt. Then I closed the box and turned the key. The trap was now fully understood. The bait was in place. The mechanism had been identified. All that remained was for the person who set it to check her handiwork. I had a terrible sense of certainty. She would not be able to resist. The waiting was the hardest part, but now I waited with the grim satisfaction of a mathematician who has just solved for X. The equation was clear. I just needed to see her face when she realized the variables had been switched. The days after discovering the receipt passed in a strange, suspended rhythm. I moved through my routines with deliberate normality, but every action felt like a performance. I was the lead actor in a play where the audience of one was waiting for me to stumble on stage. My script was my life, unchanged. Each morning, I would take my vitamin from the knitting basket with the ritualistic care of a priestess. I made sure to be seen going upstairs at 9 a.m. I would run the faucet in my bathroom, rattle the empty decoy bottle on the counter, and hum a little tune. I wanted any hidden listener to hear the sounds of a woman taking her medicine in blissful ignorance. Chloe's surveillance intensified, but it grew strained. She called every other day now, her voice tight with a concern that was starting to fray into frustration. "You're sure you're feeling all right, Ellie? No dizziness? No unusual fatigue?" "I feel wonderful," I would say, my voice bright. "The garden is thriving. I've started a new knitting project." A pause. I could almost hear her mind working, recalculating. The poison should have begun its work by now. Subtle symptoms should be appearing. My continued vitality was a problem in her equation. She visited again, unannounced, on a Wednesday afternoon. I was on the patio reading. She carried a container of soup. "I thought you might not be up to cooking," she said, her eyes scanning me like a medical scanner. "How thoughtful. I was just about to make a sandwich, but this is lovely." I took the container. "Would you like to join me?" She sat restless. She didn't want soup. She wanted data. "You look well," she said, the words seeming to cost her. "I am well." I took a spoonful of the soup. It was bland. "Thank you for this." "Are you sleeping through the night?" she pressed. "No palpitations, shortness of breath." I put the spoon down. "Chloe, these are very specific questions. Is there something you're worried about? Something you know that I do?" I let my gaze hold hers, innocent and inquiring. She looked away first, a faint blush on her cheeks. "Of course not. I'm just a worrier, you know that." She stood up abruptly. "I actually can't stay. I just wanted to drop that off. I have a thing." She left almost hurriedly. I watched her go, the soup cooling on the table. Her anxiety was palpable. The trap was silent, and the silence was gnawing at her. The next day, I saw her at the local grocery store. It was not a coincidence. I was selecting tomatoes. I felt a presence and turned. She was there, holding a basket containing a single loaf of bread. Her face was pale. "Ellie, fancy seeing you here." Her smile was a stiff flicker. "I needed a few things for dinner," I said. "You're quite far from your usual store." "I was in the area." Her eyes dropped to my shopping cart. It held normal items, vegetables, chicken, milk. Nothing indicated infirmity. Her gaze lingered on my hands, steady as they placed the tomatoes in a plastic bag. She was looking for tremors. "How are you feeling?" The question burst from her, less a query than a demand. "As I told you yesterday, perfectly fine." I kept my voice mild. "Chloe, you seem very stressed. Is everything all right with you?" It was a simple question, but it seemed to startle her. Her own health, her own state of mind, was not part of her plan. "I'm fine," she snapped, then softened it. "Just work, you know how it is." "I do. You should take some time for yourself, maybe a quiet weekend." I pushed my cart past her. "Give my love to David." I paid for my groceries and drove home. In my rearview mirror, I saw her still standing in the produce aisle, motionless, the basket hanging from her hand. That evening, David called. He didn't mention Chloe's concerns. Instead, he talked about a promotion at work, his voice cheerful. The contrast was jarring. He was living in a parallel universe where his wife was merely diligent and his mother was simply healthy. I participated in his conversation, laughed at the right moments, all while feeling the profound isolation of my knowledge. I was alone on an island of truth, with Maria as my only bridge to the mainland. I updated my notebook. Thursday, grocery store encounter. Subject displayed marked anxiety, inquired repeatedly about specific physical symptoms, appeared confused by lack of expected results. The psychological pressure was building, but not on me. It was building on her. She had set a clock ticking in her mind, and it was counting down to an event that wasn't happening. Every day I remained upright and coherent was a day her plan failed. I began to wonder what her next move would be. Would she try to increase the dosage? Would she come to check the bottle itself? Then, on Friday morning, I saw it. I went upstairs for my staged medication ritual. I entered my bathroom and stopped. The decoy bottle on the counter was not quite where I had left it. It was turned slightly, the label facing outward instead of angled toward the faucet. The cap seemed dust-free. She had been here. She had come into my home, into my bathroom, and handled the bait. She had likely opened it, seen the pills inside, the orange vitamins she must have recognized as her own, and been confronted with a terrifying puzzle. The adulterated medicine was gone. In its place were harmless supplements. Had I switched them? Had I discovered her plan? Or had I, in a bout of the forgetfulness she was trying to fabricate, simply taken the wrong bottle from the wrong place? Her confusion would be total, and a cornered animal is a dangerous animal, but a confused one is prone to mistakes. I did not touch the bottle. I left it as she had left it. I ran the faucet as usual. But that night I made a decision. I retrieved the original, now vitamin-filled bottle from the back of my medicine cabinet. I placed it on the nightstand in the guest room, in plain sight next to the lamp. It was a test, a lure. If she was desperate enough to check the source, she would find it there. She would assume I had moved my real medicine. She might even, in a panic, decide to take it herself to dispose of the evidence, or to try again. The waiting was no longer passive. It was a slow, deliberate tightening of a cord. I had done all I could. The mechanisms were in place. The decoy, the hidden real medicine, the planted bottle in the guest room, the receipt locked away, the meticulous notebook. The only variable left was Chloe's own desperation. I went to bed that night not with fear, but with a watchful anticipation. The trap was not just set. It was now surrounded by mirrors, reflecting the hunter's own image back at her. The next move had to be hers, and I was ready to observe it. The phone rang at 4:17 a.m. The digital numbers on my clock burned red in the dark. No good news ever comes at that hour. I knew who it was before I picked up the receiver. I had been waiting for this call, not with anxiety, but with a dreadful certainty. I answered on the third ring. Hello. The sound on the other end was pure, undiluted panic. Sobbing, ragged breaths, then my son's voice, shattered and screaming. Mom, it's Chloe. She collapsed. She's on the bathroom floor. She's not breathing right. I can't. The ambulance is here. They're taking her. What's wrong with her? I sat up, switching on the bedside lamp. The light was harsh. My voice, when I spoke, was calm and low, a stark contrast to his chaos. David, slow down, take a breath. An ambulance is there. Yes, they're putting her on a stretcher. Her lips are blue, Mom. She just fell. He was crying openly now. Which hospital are they taking her to? St. Vincent's. I have to go. I have to follow them. Go, I will meet you there. Drive safely, David. Do not rush and cause another accident. My instructions were clear, parental. They cut through his hysteria. He hung up without another word. The dial tone buzzed in the silent room. I placed the receiver back in its cradle. The red numbers glowed. 4:19 a.m. I did not move immediately. I sat on the edge of my bed, my robe wrapped around me. The house was profoundly still. I looked out my window at the dark street, the pools of amber under the streetlights. A strange, hollow silence filled me, followed by a surge of cold, clear vindication. The trap had sprung, exactly as engineered. I stood and walked to my closet. I dressed with deliberate care, slacks, a sweater, sensible shoes. I brushed my hair and pinned it back. I did not look in the mirror. I did not need to. I knew my face would be a mask of appropriate concern, etched with the fatigue of a woman roused from sleep by a family emergency. The performance was beginning, and I had to be flawless. Before leaving, I went to the guest room. The door was ajar. The lamp on the nightstand was off. In the gray pre-dawn light filtering through the blinds, I could see the surface of the nightstand. It was empty. The bottle I had left there was gone. I did not search for it. Its absence was all the confirmation I needed. She had taken it. In her desperate, confused state, seeing the decoy on my counter filled with her own vitamins, she must have panicked. She had found this bottle, the original one, assumed it was the real, tampered medicine, and in a frantic attempt to hide the evidence or perhaps even to use it on me another way, she had taken it. And then, in the stress of the early morning, maybe thinking they were harmless supplements, maybe in a fog of her own making, she had taken one. Or perhaps she had taken more than one. The combination of the sedatives she had mixed in with my heart pills, now ingested by her, would have a powerful, depressive effect. She had consumed her own poison. A small, tight sensation pulled at the corner of my mouth. It wasn't a smile. It was the physical recognition of a geometric proof completed. QED, she had been hoisted by her own petard. The cleaner had warned me. I had listened. And now the warning had completed its circuit. I went downstairs. I made a single cup of tea, not to drink, but to have something to hold, to ground me. I stood in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Maria had whispered her warning a lifetime ago, and I waited for the sky to lighten from black to deep blue. I gave David time to get to the hospital, for the initial chaos to settle. My mind was clear. I rehearsed the role I would play, the worried mother-in-law, confused, frightened, supportive of her son. I would ask no leading questions. I would express shock and sympathy. I would be a rock for David. I would be invisible to the medical staff. I would observe. When the first proper light of dawn touched the tops of the trees, I retrieved my purse and car keys. I locked my front door. The air outside was cool and damp. Birds were beginning their morning chatter, indifferent to the human drama unfolding at St. Vincent. As I backed out of the driveway, I glanced at my house. It looked peaceful in the soft light, the garden tidy, the windows dark. It was still my sanctuary. The violation had been answered. The threat was now on a stretcher, and I was driving toward the consequences, armed with nothing but the truth and a cold patience. The drive was quiet. I turned on the radio to a classical station, something neutral. I focused on the road, on the mechanics of driving. I did not allow myself to think about David's shattered voice or the blue lips he described. Those were the consequences of her choices, not mine. I had merely changed the direction of the trajectory. She had aimed the weapon. I had simply turned it around. I parked in the visitor lot at St. Vincent's. The emergency room doors slid open with a hushed sigh. The bright, sterile light, the smell of antiseptic and fear, the low hum of anxiety, it was a world away from my quiet kitchen. I approached the front desk, my face arranged into an expression of gentle urgency. "I'm here for my daughter-in-law, Chloe Reynolds. She was brought in by ambulance." The nurse nodded, her fingers tapping on a keyboard. "They're with her in Bay 4, down the hall to the left. The family is in the waiting area just beside it." I thanked her and walked down the indicated corridor. My footsteps were quiet on the linoleum. I could hear David's voice before I saw him, ragged and pleading, coming from behind a curtain. I turned into the small, square waiting area. It was empty. I sat in a hard plastic chair, my hands folded in my lap, and I waited for my son to emerge. The next act was about to begin. David emerged from behind the curtain like a sleepwalker. His clothes were rumpled. His face was pale and slack with shock. He saw me and stumbled toward the waiting area chairs, collapsing into the one next to mine. He put his head in his hands. "They're running tests," he said, his voice muffled. "They said her vitals are stable now, but she was barely conscious when they brought her in. They asked me what she took." I placed a hand on his back. The muscle was rigid under my palm. "What did you tell them?" "I told them I didn't know. She doesn't take anything, just vitamins, the occasional allergy pill." He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and bewildered. "They kept asking about prescriptions. I said she doesn't have any." A doctor in blue scrubs pushed through the curtain and approached us. She was young, with a tired but focused expression. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm Dr. Patel. We've stabilized your wife. Her respiratory depression is improving." "What caused it?" David demanded, standing up too quickly. Dr. Patel's gaze was clinical, assessing us both. "The blood panel shows a significant presence of two drugs. Lorazepam, which is a sedative, and atenolol, which is a beta blocker, a heart medication. Taken together, especially in an unprescribed combination, they can cause exactly this kind of episode: dangerously low blood pressure, suppressed breathing." David stared at her. "That's impossible. She's not prescribed either of those things. She doesn't have a heart condition." The doctor's expression remained neutral, but a professional alertness entered her eyes. "The levels indicate ingestion within the last few hours. You're certain she didn't have access to these medications, perhaps from another family member?" Her glance flicked to me, then away. It was a routine question, but it hung in the air. "No," David said, too forcefully. "No one. My mother takes heart medication, but it's not atenolol. It's—" He trailed off, frowning, trying to remember. "Lisinopril," I supplied quietly. "I take lisinopril. It's a different class. I have the bottle at home." My statement was fact, delivered without defensiveness. Dr. Patel nodded, making a note on her clipboard. "We see cases like this sometimes. A person obtains medication from another source, sometimes for anxiety, sometimes for other reasons. The important thing is she's stable. We'll monitor her for the next several hours. She's awake but groggy. You can see her briefly." David followed the doctor back through the curtain. I waited. I listened to the sounds of the ER, a distant page, the squeak of a wheel, the low murmur of other crises. The official narrative was now established in a medical record. Chloe Reynolds, accidental or intentional ingestion of a sedative and a heart drug. The puzzle pieces were on the table, but no one was putting them together yet. After 10 minutes, David returned. "She's asking for you," he said, his voice flat. "Me?" "She's confused. She keeps saying she needs to talk to you." I stood and followed him. The curtain rasped along its track as I entered the bay. Chloe lay on a gurney, an IV in her arm, monitors beeping a steady rhythm. Her skin was waxy, her eyes half-lidded. She turned her head slowly as I approached. "Ellie," she whispered. Her voice was slurry. "I'm here, Chloe. You gave everyone a scare." I kept my tone neutral, not warm, not cold. Her eyes tried to focus on me. There was fear in them and a dawning, horrified comprehension. "The bottle," she breathed. "What bottle, dear?" I asked, leaning a little closer so only she could hear. David stood at the foot of the bed, watching, his arms crossed tightly. My head, it was. She was fighting the drugs, trying to form a coherent lie, a story. I must have taken the wrong thing. "What wrong thing?" David asked, stepping forward. "Chloe, what did you take? Where did you get it?" She shook her head weakly on the pillow. "I don't know, I don't remember, I was stressed. I must have mixed up my pills." Her gaze locked onto mine, pleading and full of a silent, desperate warning. "Don't say anything." I held her look for a long moment. I let her see the absolute lack of confusion in my eyes. I let her see that I understood every word she wasn't saying. Then I blinked, and my expression shifted back to one of polite concern. "The doctor said you'll be fine with rest. You should sleep." Her eyelids fluttered closed. Whether from relief or defeat or the drugs, I couldn't tell. A single tear escaped and tracked into her hairline. David and I left the bay. In the hallway, he ran a hand through his hair. "She's lying," he said, the words torn from him. "She knows what she took. She's hiding something." "Perhaps she's embarrassed," I offered mildly. "If she got a sedative from somewhere, maybe she was too ashamed to say." "But the heart medicine," he insisted, his mind circling the inexplicable fact. "Where would she get atenolol? Why would she take it?" He looked at me, a sudden, awful thought occurring to him. "Mom, your medicine, is it all accounted for?" "Yes," I said, meeting his gaze squarely. "It is. And as I said, mine is lisinopril, not atenolol. The pharmacy can confirm that. The police could confirm it if it comes to that." The word police hung between us. David paled further. It won't come to that, it can't. It was an accident, a mistake. Of course, I said, but we both heard the hollowness in his words. We left the hospital as the morning shift was starting. The world outside was bright and ordinary. David drove me home in a heavy silence. When he pulled into my driveway, he didn't turn off the engine. He stared at the steering wheel. Get some rest, David, I said, opening the car door. Call me when you know more. He just nodded. I entered my house. The quiet was different now. It was the quiet after a storm has passed, leaving damage visible only to those who know where to look. I went to the living room desk and opened my notebook. I wrote down the time, the doctor's name, the drugs identified, David's reaction, Chloe's fragmented statements. I documented the official medical truth. Then I went to the locked box. I took out the receipt for the lorazepam. I placed it on the desk next to the notebook, the final piece. The motive, the method, the outcome, all laid out in a sequence only I could fully connect. David's doubt was a crack in a dam. Soon, the truth would need to flow through it. I would have to be the one to control that flood. He came the next evening. I saw his car pull up, watched him sit behind the wheel for a full 5 minutes, his head bowed. I knew then that the crack had widened. The hospital had discharged Chloe to her sister's care for observation. David was alone with his thoughts, and thoughts, when fueled by enough dissonance, inevitably seek resolution. I opened the front door before he could knock. He looked aged, his shoulders slumped under his coat. Come in, David. He stepped inside, his eyes avoiding mine. He stood in the foyer, lost. I don't understand what's happening, he said, his voice rough. Let's sit down. I led him to the living room, to the same sofa where Maria had first voiced her warning. The symmetry was not lost on me. I took the armchair opposite him. The coffee table between us was bare. The doctors said she'll recover fully, he began, reciting facts. But they filed a report with the Poison Control Center. Because of the unprescribed drugs, they asked if she had a history of self-harm. He swallowed hard. I said no, but I don't know what to believe anymore. What do you believe happened? I asked, my voice quiet. I think she took something she shouldn't have. Maybe she was stressed, maybe she got pills from a friend, but the heart medicine, Mom, the atenolol, that's what doesn't fit. It's like a piece from a different puzzle. I nodded slowly. It is from a different puzzle, but the puzzles are connected. I reached for the small, locked box I had placed on the side table earlier. I took the key from my pocket, unlocked it, and set it on the coffee table between us. I need to show you some things. Before I do, you must understand that everything I did to protect myself. I did not act out of malice. I acted out of survival. His eyes widened, fixed on the box. What is that? Evidence, I said simply. I lifted out the folded pharmacy receipt first. I smoothed it and slid it across the table to him. This was found in the guest room wastebasket by Maria, the Tuesday after she saw Chloe in my bathroom. He picked it up. His eyes scanned the date, the items. His brow furrowed at the toothpaste, the mouthwash, then stopped dead on the last line. His face went slack. Lorazepam. He looked up at me. This is the sedative they found in her system. Yes. But this is her handwriting on the bag. This is her receipt. The implications began to dawn, slowly, terribly. She bought it and then she took it. Not exactly, I said. I reached into the box and retrieved my notebook. I opened it to the first page. Read from the beginning. He took the notebook with trembling hands. He read Maria's warning, my recorded suspicions. He read about the missing pills, my decision to switch the bottles. He read about his own dinner visit, his questions about my health, fed to him by Chloe. He read about the grocery store encounter, her anxiety. He read my observation about the moved decoy bottle. His face was a mask of increasing horror. He was reading the story of his wife's betrayal in his mother's meticulous script. When he looked up, his eyes were glistening. This can't be true. I reached back into the box and removed the final item, the original orange prescription bottle. I placed it on the table with a soft click. This is the bottle that was on my counter, the one Chloe tampered with. I switched the contents. What's inside now are vitamins from her own supply. But before that, it contained my heart medication mixed with the lorazepam she purchased. She removed 7 of my pills, David. She crushed them, mixed them with the crushed sedative, and put the mixture back. She intended for me to ingest it, little by little, until I had a fatal accident or simply died in my sleep. He stared at the bottle as if it were a venomous snake. No, she wouldn't, she couldn't. She did. Maria saw her in here. The receipt proves she acquired the tool. My switched pills are why I am still alive. And the bottle you took from the guest room nightstand, the one she took, thinking it was the real, tampered medicine, is why she is in the hospital. I let the statement hang in the quiet room. She ingested her own poison, David. She aimed it at me, and through her own panic and confusion, she turned it on herself. A sob broke from him. He covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking. The sounds he made were those of a man whose world was disintegrating. I did not move to comfort him. He needed to feel the full, brutal impact. After a long minute, he dropped his hands. His face was wet, but his eyes held a new, awful clarity. She was trying to kill you. The words were a bare, stark fact now. For the money, for the house. Yes. And you knew. For over a week you knew and you didn't tell me. There was accusation there and pain. What would you have believed, David, if I had come to you with a story about your wife poisoning me based on the word of our cleaner and a missing pill? You would have thought I was paranoid, or senile, just as she was hopping you would. I kept my voice level, not defensive. I needed evidence. I needed to protect myself first. Confronting her without proof would have only made her more careful, more dangerous, and it would have driven a wedge between us that might never have been repaired. He knew I was right. The conflict warred on his face, betrayal by his wife, guilt for his blindness, a dawning gratitude for my caution. "What do we do now?" he whispered. "That is your decision as much as mine," I said. "We have the evidence, the receipt, the notebook, the tampered bottle. We could go to the police. It would mean a scandal, a trial. It would mean your wife likely going to prison for attempted murder." He flinched at the words, attempted murder. "Or," I continued, "we handle it within the family, on my terms, but you need to be part of that. You need to hear the truth from her, and you need to decide what kind of man you are married to and what kind of son you want to be." He looked from the receipt to the notebook to the bottle. The physical proof was undeniable. He looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time since this began. He saw not a fragile old woman, but a strategist who had outmaneuvered a killer. He saw his mother. He stood up, walked around the coffee table, and sank to his knees beside my armchair. He wrapped his arms around my waist and buried his face in my lap, like he did as a small boy after a nightmare. His body shook with silent tears. I rested a hand on his head, on his thick, familiar hair. The anger I had held so tightly began to loosen, not vanishing, but transforming. This was the cost and the reward. The truth had broken him, but it had also brought him back to me. We stayed like that for a long time, in the quiet living room, surrounded by the evidence of a war he never knew was being fought. The battle was over. The aftermath was about to begin. David's raw grief hardened into a resolve overnight. He stayed in his old room, and in the morning his eyes were red but dry, his posture rigid. Over coffee, he said, "I need to hear it from her. I need to see her face when she says it." I nodded. "We will go together, but you must let me speak first. This is my confrontation as much as yours." He did not argue. We drove to the hospital in silence. Chloe had been moved to a private room. The sterility of the place felt appropriate, a clean, white space for a dirty truth to be aired. She was sitting up in bed, dressed in a hospital gown, picking at a breakfast tray. She looked small, stripped of her usual calculated charm. When she saw David, her face lit with a pathetic hope. Then she saw me behind him, and the hope died, replaced by a hunted fear. "David," she said, her voice weak, "you came." He did not move to embrace her. He stood at the foot of the bed, his hands shoved in his pockets. "Mom has some things to say." I walked to the side of the bed, placing my purse on the chair. I looked down at her. There was no anger in my gaze, only a forensic calm. "The doctors say you will recover. That is fortunate." She looked between us, her breathing quickening. I don't understand what happened. I must have had a bad reaction to something." "Lorazepam and atenolol," I stated. "A dangerous combination. Where did you get them, Chloe?" Her eyes darted to David, then back to me. "I don't know. I told you I was confused. Maybe I took something by mistake." "A mistake," I repeated. I opened my purse and took out the folded pharmacy receipt. I held it up so she could see it. "You purchased the lorazepam at a CVS across town, the Tuesday after you were in my bathroom." All color drained from her face. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Maria saw you," I continued, my voice flat. "She saw you go into my bathroom and spend 7 minutes alone with my heart medication. You took 7 pills. You crushed them. You mixed them with crushed lorazepam. You returned the mixture to my bottle. You expected me to take it and slowly decline or die. You expected everyone to believe it was my heart." "No," she whispered, the word a dry rustle. "That's a lie." "Is it?" I took out my notebook, opened it to the first entry, and placed it on her blanket. "Read it. A daily record of your surveillance, your probing questions, your lies to David about my health. It is all there." She wouldn't look at it. She stared at her hands, twisting the sheet. "Look at it." David's voice cracked like a whip in the quiet room. She flinched. Her eyes, wide with terror, scanned the page. She saw her own actions reflected back in my precise handwriting. Her shoulders began to shake. "I switched the bottles," I said. "Your poisoned medicine is in a safe place. The bottle you took from my guest room contained vitamins. You ingested the poison you meant for me. That is the only reason you are here, and not me." A harsh, gasping sob escaped her. She covered her face. "I was scared," she wept, the words muffled. "Scared of what?" David asked, his voice trembling with fury. "Of waiting," she cried, dropping her hands. Her face was a mess of tears and desperation. "Of waiting for years while she lived in that big house with all that money just sitting there. We have debts, David. We have plans. That house should be ours. It would be ours eventually, but it was taking so long." She was pleading with him now, as if her greed were a justification he might understand. I thought if it was fast, if it was quiet, no one would question it. She's old. She has a heart condition. It would make sense." The room was silent, except for her ragged crying. David looked at her as if seeing a stranger. The last of his denial evaporated in the face of her confession. I let the silence stretch. Then I spoke, my tone final, judicial. "This is what will happen. You will check yourself into a long-term residential treatment facility for stress, for psychological issues. You will be away for a considerable time. David will file for divorce. He will do so quietly, citing irreconcilable differences. There will be no police, no public scandal." Her head snapped up. You won't tell." "Not if you comply. If you ever attempt to contact David or me again, if you ever dispute the divorce terms, if you ever step foot near my property, I will take this receipt, this notebook, and the tampered bottle to the police. The charge will be attempted murder. The evidence is conclusive." She stared at me, understanding dawning. This was not forgiveness. It was a conditional exile. It was mercy, but a mercy that felt like a life sentence. "Do you understand?" I asked. She nodded, a small broken movement. "David," I turned to him, "are these terms acceptable to you?" He looked at the woman in the bed, the architect of so much malice, now reduced to a sobbing wreck. He nodded once sharply. "Yes." "Then it's settled." I picked up my notebook and the receipt from her blanket. I placed them back in my purse. "A facility out of state would be best. Your sister can make the arrangements. Today." I turned and walked to the door. I did not look back. David followed me a moment later, his footsteps heavy in the corridor. We did not speak until we were outside in the weak hospital sunlight. He breathed in deeply, as if emerging from foul water. "It's over." "For us, it is," I said. "For her, it is just beginning. The consequences have their own momentum now." We got into the car. He started the engine. As we pulled away from the hospital, I felt no triumph. I felt a clean, surgical finality. The threat was excised. The justice was quiet, and it was mine. The balance had been restored, not through violence, but through the unassailable power of the truth, strategically deployed. She would live with what she had done, and with what she had almost accomplished. That, I decided, was a more fitting sentence than any cell. Weeks later, the rhythm of my house returned to its true, undisturbed cadence. The fear had dissipated, leaving behind not a scar, but a quiet, fortified certainty. The mechanisms I had set in motion continued their work without any further need for my intervention. Chloe's sister arranged her admission to a residential treatment center in Arizona, specializing in severe anxiety and compulsive behaviors. The official story, thin but serviceable, was accepted by their circle. David filed for divorce, citing the strain of her health crisis. There were no dramatic scenes. The transaction was clean, clinical, and final. David came for dinner every Sunday now. The first few visits were heavy with unspoken words and shared trauma. But gradually, a new kind of normalcy began to form. We talked about his work, my garden, books we were reading. We did not speak of Chloe. Her name became a void we mutually agreed to avoid. One evening, as he helped me dry the dishes, he said, "I'm selling the apartment. It feels tainted." "Where will you go?" I asked, handing him a plate. "I've been looking at condos closer to here. Smaller, simpler." He glanced at me. "If that's all right." "It's more than all right." And it was. His presence was no longer a duty or a performance. It was a choice. The son I had raised was re-emerging from the fog of a bad marriage. On a bright Thursday afternoon, Maria arrived not with her cleaning supplies, but with a large woven basket. "No work today, Senora Ellie," she announced, her face lit with a smile that reached her eyes. "Today, we have lunch. I made tamales." We set the patio table. The sun was warm, the geraniums a riot of red against the white fence. It was a celebration, though we never stated its purpose aloud. We ate, and the conversation was easy, flowing from her grandchildren to my knitting project to the best way to fertilize roses. After a comfortable silence, Maria said, "My cousin's boy, he is a lawyer, a good one." I showed him a copy of the receipt, and the notes, not the originals, a copy. He said it is very clear. He said to tell you that if there is ever any trouble from that direction, you have a case that would hold. He put this in writing. She slid a folded piece of paper from her pocket. It was a brief, formal note from an attorney, stating his opinion that the evidence indicated clear malicious intent and constituted probable cause for criminal charges. I took the note, touched by her foresight. "Thank you, Maria. This is a wise precaution." I did not need it, but its existence was a testament to our alliance. "I was so afraid that day," she said, her voice soft. "To tell you, I thought you might not believe me or you might be angry." "I was angry," I admitted, "but not at you. Your warning was the first domino. Without it, everything would have fallen differently." She nodded, satisfied. We finished our lunch surrounded by the hum of bees and the scent of cut grass. The world, in that moment, was precisely as it should be. That evening, after Maria had gone, I went to the locked box one final time. I removed the receipt, the notebook, the attorney's note, and the original, now harmless bottle. I took them to the fireplace in the living room, though it was not cold enough for a fire. I struck a match and watched as the paper evidence curled and blackened, dissolving into fragile ash. The plastic bottle warped and melted, emitting a chemical smell that quickly faded. I stirred the ashes until they were indistinguishable from one another. The physical proof was gone. The memory, however, and the lessons embedded within it were permanent. I had not just survived a plot against my life. I had dissected it, neutralized it, and dictated its conclusion. The victory was not in Chloe's downfall, but in the restoration of my peace and the redemption of my relationship with my son. The house was mine again, truly mine, its walls no longer holding a secret threat. I sat in my armchair, the same one I had sat in when David wept in my lap. The evening light slanted through the window, laying a golden rectangle on the rug. I felt a profound and quiet contentment. The cost had been high, a fundamental trust in family shattered, but what was rebuilt was stronger because it was based on clear-eyed truth. Justice had been served, not by a court, but by the steady application of intelligence and will. It was a silent, personal justice. And as the last of the sunlight faded from the room, I thought of the first domino, the whisper that started it all. The cleaner had warned me. And because I listened, because I planned, and because I acted, her warning became the foundation of my peace. I had made my enemy take her own medicine, and in doing so, I had cured my world of its poison.